Okay, so in this small video, I'm just going to go over real quick some of the sources one could use to um, counter the accusation that Jews were like dominating the slave trade or whatever. I sometimes hear this on the far right, and it's pretty obvious that they just want to like blame Jews for like another evil and like kind of deflect from like Gentile white Christians or whatever who were involved in the slave trade. And that's not to say that Jews weren't involved at all, or that like white Gentiles were the only people who ever committed like the act of slavery. That's obviously not true. Every group has participated in it, and it's been like a universal norm in all of history. And I mean, frankly, if you want to look at the ending of the slave trade, it was mainly done by the British Empire, really. But that's neither here nor there. Um, but the notion that Jews were disproportionate in this or like dominated it came from the 1990s book, The Secret Relationship Between Blacks and Jews by the Nation of Islam, specifically Volume 1. I'm not sure what the other volumes are about, but this volume was released in the 90s. And since then, there's been a number of books and articles directly responding to it. So the first one I want to just mention is Ministry of Lies by Harold Brackman. And this is like a smaller book, almost like a pamphlet that just has kind of formatted in a Q&A kind of format. And it's really easy to read. Like you can read it in like an hour or two. So that's like a good source, but you'd probably have to order it specifically from a library because it's really expensive on Amazon for whatever reason. It probably just wasn't in print for very long. The other book I want to mention is Eli Faber's Jews, Slaves, and the Slave Trade. And that deals more broadly with the uh, issue of slavery in like the Caribbean and the mainland colonies, and I believe England as well. And goes over more of like the data and like stats and figures and stuff. It has a bunch of tables and lists of prominent slavers among Jews and non-Jews and whatnot. And then the other book is Jews and the American Slave Trade by Saul S. Friedman, and that's probably like the largest book of the three, and deals with like the history of slavery a bit and pro and anti-slavery sentiments among Jews and other people, and also just goes like each area of the New World, I guess you'd say, and kind of just gives a little bit of the history and background of Jewish participation in the slave trade. But the main theme, really, from the books is that Jews were like definitely not overrepresented in basically any form of the slave trade. There may have been like one or two areas where Jews, for a small amount of time, were overrepresented. And it's even harder to figure out, too, because many of the Jews that they talk about, the Nation of Islam, a lot of them were conversos, so Jews who converted to Christianity, and they were also called New Christians. So it's kind of hard sometimes to figure out who's who, but essentially, like the Jewish population in the New World was just not very large, and it's not really apparent that they engaged in slavery any more or less than anyone else. And there's like a bunch of facts and figures to back that up. I'm not going to delve too deep into the books just because I think they speak for themselves, and I usually want to do a video on a topic that hasn't been like formally addressed in writing, I guess, because that's just not always the case. But this accusation has been dealt with, so you may as well just read the books or just look at the relevant information. There's also smaller articles too that I'll post in the description that deal with this. And just a quick history, because the book Secret Relationship, it also deals with just like the general history of Jews and blacks in America, and that's kind of an interesting history to look at because Jews were definitely like pretty disproportionate in the civil rights movement, and like you'd think that Jews and blacks had a pretty good relationship, but at some point that kind of disappeared, and there's been some animosity between the two groups. And I think this is just mainly from both groups were fairly urbanized, especially after the Great Migration, with a lot of black people moving up north to northern cities, and Jews, of course, like always, or at least usually live in like urban population centers, especially New York City. So there were issues with like Jews like running convenience stores or being landlords, and then that could cause issues and like even riots sometimes. Um, and basically by probably like the 60s, 70s, whatever, like there really was no special relationship, they call it. Some people call it that, but yeah, like it's basically ever since then not been the greatest relationship. I mean, the T groups, I mean, they don't really interact anymore, I'd say, but regardless, it's an interesting topic to look into, and I think it's kind of weird that like a bunch of neo Nazis have kind of co-opted, or not a bunch, but some weird far right white nationalist groups have kind of co-opted this argument that was originally propounded by like a weird offshoot of Islam that's like a black separatist group that believes a black scientist named Yaqub created all white people and all white people are the devil. So it's kind of a weird thing that they're taking this information and using it for their own use. Um, but yeah, I just wanted to share those resources. And I'll probably come back to this topic later on. I think it'll come up in some book reviews I plan on doing. But yeah, besides that, just wanted to put some of this info out there, some of the resources, and yeah, that's it. So have a good one.